Hi guys, today I'd like you to meet Flutter Pig. He's a new addition to add to your Webkinz collection. You can purchase him this September, which is very soon. He has these soft wings, big floppy ears, and a cute soft body. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to make this 3D Flutter Pig, and you're going to need about 135 bands. So let's get started. Let's start by making the wing, and I already made one. So I'm going to show you how to make the other one, and you'll have to pause the video to make the second one. Starting with the color of your pig, mine will be pink, looping it from the first to the second peg, taking a single band, twist, double. My wing is white, looping it from the second to the third, continuing down with a single white band from the third to the fourth, and coming diagonally from the third side to the fourth center, another diagonal band from the fourth to the fifth center, and finishing it off from the center fourth to the center fifth, taking another single band, looping it from the fifth to the sixth, and capping the sixth peg off by looping it 4 times. 2, 3, 4. Taking another single band, twist, double, and put that as a holding band across these 2 pegs. Now we're going to loop up. Go under the cap band, grab the bottom single, and very carefully loop up and onto itself. Make sure you see the nice teardrop. If you don't, there's a lot of tension. Don't over pull it, and follow your hook around the peg to release any tension. Go to the next peg, grabbing the top single, loop up and onto itself, and continue up your loom, always grabbing the bottom single. And lastly, I'm looping up the second side peg to the first, creating nice teardrops, taking your wing off the loom, making sure the bands are even. So there are my wings. Go ahead and pause the video and come back when you're done. Now let's make the legs. I'm taking a single band, looping it 4 times on my hook. This is the hoof, and you can make it whatever color you want. I'm using beige. Taking 2 single rubber bands and pulling those loops onto the 2 single bands and getting them onto my hook like that. Taking 2 more single bands and pulling all those loops onto a single band. So this is the front leg, and then getting everything onto a single band. So that's one front leg. Let's make the other one, same thing. Taking a single hoof color, looping it 4 times on your hook, taking 2 single bands, pulling the loops onto the 2 single bands and onto our hook, grabbing 2 more single bands and getting all those loops onto the 2 single bands, and lastly onto a single band. And these are all our pig color. So now the front legs are done. Let's do the hind legs. Again, taking a single band, same color hoof, looping it 4 times on a hook, taking 2 single bands, pulling all those loops onto the 2 single bands and onto our hook, taking a single, we're going to twist, double, and getting those loops onto the single we doubled, onto our hook, taking another single band, and we're going to pull all those loops onto the single band. That's the first hind leg. Repeat. My legs are done. Let's put it aside. Now let's make the eyes, and I'm going to do it a little different. We're going to put on the last two pegs on our loom, twist in the center, loop it back up onto the second peg, twist the band you have in your finger again, and loop it up onto the second peg. So you looped from the second to the first and then looping it twice, crossing once in the center at the very bottom. Now we're going to pull the bottom loop up and over to the center, so you create that knot, and pull the other side, pull the bottom band, and creating the knot in the center, and pull the eyes off the loom and onto our hook, and get it onto our single band, the color of our pig, like that. Repeat for the other eye, and if this is too complicated, just do the single band, looping it 4 times on your hook. So I'm going to twist it, put it on the second loop, twist it over to the center, creating the X, twist it back, creating the X on the outside, looping it onto the second peg once, and twist on the outside again twice onto the second peg. Now pull the bottom band up, part of the X, up and over to the center, making it cross, and the other side, same thing, like that. Get the eyes off and onto a hook, and getting it onto a single band. And let's put the eyes away. Let's make the ears, and I'm making it a little floppier than the normal pig's ear because the Flutter Pig's ears are pretty floppy. So to make this ear, we're taking a single pink band, the color of our pig, we're looping it 4 times on our hook, taking 2 pink bands and pulling the 4 loops onto the 2 single bands and let it dangle. Taking a single beige, looping it 4 times on the hook, and then pulling the loops on the other side that's dangling and pulling it right onto our hook. So that's what it should look like. Now take a single band. We're going to pull all these loops onto our single band. Carefully just scooching it along and pulling it onto the single band and getting the loop onto our hook, like that. Taking another single band and getting the 2 loops onto our single band. Let's make the other ear, same thing, taking a single pink band, looping it 4 times on the hook, taking 2 single bands, pulling the 4 loops onto the 2 single bands and let it dangle, grabbing our beige, looping it 4 times on the hook and pulling the other loops onto our hook. like that. Taking another pink band, getting all these loops onto this pink band, and getting the other side of the loop onto our hook, our last single band for our ear, pulling it through. There are our ears. Let's put it aside to add to our body later. And now let's do the nose. Taking a single band for your nose, I'm using beige again, looping it 4 times on your hook. Taking 2 pink bands, twist, double, and pulling all those loops onto the 2 single bands we doubled and getting them onto our hook. So there's our nose. Now taking 4 single bands, the color of our pig, getting it onto a hook and pulling him through those loops off of the hook and onto the 4 single bands. Taking our loom, and we're going to loop it from on the first center peg to the side second peg, like that. Now pull the top 2 loops off of the side second peg and loop it to the third center peg, and pull the 2 loops on top off of the center first peg and loop it to the side first peg, and that's the right side. Now these 2 pegs are covered and these 2 pegs are covered. We're going to cover 6 pegs, so we're going to loop the last 2 bands to cover these 2 pegs. So take 2 single bands, twist in the center, and loop it across to the 6th peg on a loom, like that. And if you're working on the monster tail, this loop here should be on the side 3rd peg to cover the 6 pegs. Row number 2, we're going to add our eyes, and we're going to loop it from the first left peg to the first center peg and the first left to the second left peg on the loom, like that. Now taking a single band, we'll cover the rest of the 6 pegs. And looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Push it down. And that was row number 2. In row number 3, we're going to add the ears. I'm going to add it on the same 3 pegs as the eyes. So looping it from the center first to the left first peg, getting our second ear and looping it from the first to the second peg on the left side. Now cover the rest of the peg or the loom with a single band, and we'll loop the bottom 2 bands up and over to the center for all 6 pegs. And if you're working on the monster tail, it's the same process. It's just this 2 loops, though these 2 loops are on the side 3rd peg. So this is row number 3. Push it down. For row number 4, we'll just take 6 single bands covering the 6 pegs, and then looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. So that was row number 4. Now let's take it off the loom I'm going to pull it off the center third peg. If you have the monster tail, pull it off of the side third peg, going around clockwise around your loom, getting all the 2 loops onto your hook, and we're going to stuff them. If you have pink bands, go ahead and do that. Going to put a few pink bands inside my pig's head, and you can use tissue papers, cotton balls, or whatever you have, but just don't overstuff our little piggy. So there's our flutter pig so far. Now we're going to take 4 single bands for his body onto our loops and pulling all the loops off of our hook and onto the 4 single bands very carefully. And let's get it onto our loom. And we want our head facing up like this with his chin up between the first center and the left first peg. So we're going to put the side with a hook onto the center first peg and loop the other side, getting it off of my finger and onto the second left peg right there. So that's what it should look like. Now taking 2 single bands off of the center first peg, and I'm going to loop it onto the right first peg, grabbing the top 2 loops off of the second left peg and looping it onto the center third peg. So that's what it should look like. And we've covered 4 pegs so far, so essentially we're just looping the bands, covering the pegs across from it. Now the last 2 bands, we're covering the other 2 pegs for a total of 6 pegs. So loop it across, twist in the center, and covering the 6th peg, like that. And if you're working on a monster tail, these 2 loops can be on the side third peg. That was row number 1. Row number 2, we're going to add the front legs, and it should look like that one and not the one with the single double on top. So grabbing our front legs, we're going to loop it on the first to the second peg on our loom on the left side, grabbing our other leg and looping it from the center first to the right first peg. There are our legs, and now cover the rest of the 6 pegs with a single band, covering our 6 pegs. And we'll loop the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Push everything down. Make sure our legs are on the outside. And if you're working on the loom, if this loop is here, that's okay too. I'm just showing it in a monster tail configuration. In a monster tail, these center pegs wouldn't be here. So that was row number 2. Row number 3, we're going to expand to 8 pegs. We're going to pull these 2 loops off of the side third peg if you're on the monster tail. If you're on the loom, then it should be on this third center peg. Just pull those loops off and put it on the third center peg. So that's what it should look like. Now we're going to pull a loop off of the side second peg that's attached to the first and moving it to the third. So I'm going to go on the side second peg, pull a loop off, check to make sure it's attached to the first, which this isn't. Put it aside, grab the other loop, and it should be attached to this first peg and moving it to the third. Like that, and then reattaching the one we pulled off first. And now the second and third peg each has a loop. Repeat on this side. Same thing, pull the top loop off And I see it's attached to the third center or the fourth center peg. Putting it aside, grabbing the other loop off the second peg, moving it to the third, and then reattaching this one. Once again, the second and third each has a loop. So now let's add the wings, and we'll add it on the third side peg to the center fourth, or the bottommost peg on your monster tail, and repeat for the other side. We're going to loop it from the side third to the center bottommost or the fourth on the loom, and covering the rest of our pegs with a single band and looping the bottom bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. So you should have used 6 bands to cover the 8 pegs, including the wings that make 8. Now we're going to pull the bottom band. Since we expanded, the second and third peg each has a loop. Loop that up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. Repeat for the other 8 pegs going around your loom. Push it down. That was row number 3. Row 4 and 5, we're taking a single band, covering the 8 pegs and looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And this part is pretty repetitive. We're not adding anything or expanding, so we're just looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops per peg. So I'm going to fast forward through rows 4 and 5. So that was row number 5. Row number 6, we'll add the hind legs. We'll add it on the same pegs as the front 2 legs. Once again, this is what the hind leg should look like. It has a single double towards the single loop. Grab those loops and putting it on the first and second peg on the left, and the first center and the right first peg on the right side. Covering the rest of our loom with a single band and looping the bottom 2 bands up and over, leaving 2 loops left per peg. And if you're working on a monster tail, you can go ahead and stuff him, but don't overstuff him. He'll be too fat. Let's take it off the loom, starting with these loops on the center bottommost peg or the fourth center peg on your loom, grabbing the 2 loops onto our hook and getting all those bands off of our loom, going clockwise very carefully, pulling our pig or flutter pig off the loom. So that's what he should look like so far. Now let's stuff him, and you can stuff him with whatever you have. I'm just using some pink bands so it doesn't show. You can use tissue paper, toilet paper, whatever you have. Once again, do not overstuff him. Make sure he's nice and squishy and fluffy still. So there's my flutter pig so far, and let's tie him off, taking a single band and pulling all the loops onto the single band and tie a slip knot. Pull it tight to cinch his body. You can fix his legs. And for the slip knot band, we're going to also use that as a tail. So we're going to take that slip knot band, wrap it around our finger, put a hook through to help tie the slip knot. Grab the loop on the end of our slip knot band, getting it on a hook and pulling it in to tie a little knot on the other side, on this side of our tail, to form our little tail for our little flutter pig. So there's our flutter pig so far. Make sure you fix his legs and any loose bands in his ears to the way you want it to look, and his head's a little droopy. And if this is the look you want, that's okay. He should be able to stand for you. But if you want his head to be a little lifted, put your hook through these loops in between his wings, get it on a hook like that, grabbing the two loops from behind his head or his neck right here, these two loops on the left side, and getting a hook through like that. Taking a single band, and this will also act as a charm string, and pull the 4 loops off of our hook and onto the single band. And we'll just tie it off in a slip knot. So this helps hold our pig's head up. So he's looking up for you. And you can tuck in the charm string if you want, but I think it's cute. It makes him look like he's flying. And he should be able to stand upright for you. So this is our little flutter pig. I hope you like him. Thanks for watching.